Imagine this. You're sitting alone in a stone chamber, deep beneath the largest arena the ancient world ever built. The walls are sweating. The air tastes like rust. Above you, 50,000 people have just finished cheering, while your husband was torn apart by an animal he never had a chance against. The roar of the crowd has faded into a distant hum. The torches along the corridor sputter, one by one, falling asleep. And then, footsteps. Not the quick, nervous steps of a guard making his rounds. These are slow, heavy, intentional. Each one echoes louder than the last, like someone wants you to hear them coming. A shadow stops outside your cell. The guard doesn't speak. He just slides a key into the lock, turns it, pulls open the door, as if this is nothing more than routine. Behind him stands the gladiator who survived today's slaughter. His skin is coated in blood that clearly didn't come from his own body. He looks at you, just looks. And then, gestures. That's it. No announcement, no ceremony. And the guard walks away. This isn't the opening scene of some horror film. This was simply a weekday reality inside the Roman Empire. What you're about to hear isn't a conspiracy. It isn't fantasy. It isn't a storyteller exaggerating for drama. It's built from the writings of Roman authors themselves, and reinforced by archaeological evidence carved into the stone beneath the Colosseum. No teacher mentions this. Most documentaries avoid it. Hollywood pretends it never existed. But it was real, and once you understand how normal this was for Rome, you'll never think of gladiators or empires or West the same way again. Before we go down into the truly dark layers of this story, take a second to tap the like button. Not for me. Do it so the algorithm knows you want more of the history that's been left in shadow. And if you're watching from somewhere far from Rome, drop your country in the comments. Because what we're about to explore is bigger than one empire. It's a mirror for every superpower in human history. Now, let's go underground. Movies show you the killing. They show the cheering. They show the rebellion, the courage, the choreography. What they never show is the system that kept running after the crowds went home. There's a modern scholarly term for it, Victoria Carnalis, the carnal victory. The Romans didn't invent that phrase. They didn't need to. The practice was so normal, so woven into the fabric of their culture, that naming it would have been like naming the act of breathing. It was simply expected. Here's how it worked. When Rome conquered new territory, they didn't just defeat armies. They absorbed entire populations with the efficiency of a factory line. Soldiers marched into a region, burned resistance to the ground, and immediately began the process of sorting human beings. Men capable of fighting, shipped off to die in mines, or thrown into arenas. Children, sold into slave markets scattered across the empire. Women, they became captivae, state-owned war prizes, not prisoners, not citizens, not even slaves with a defined economic role. Legally, they were classified as res, things. The same category as tools, tables, or pack animals. An object couldn't testify. An object couldn't refuse. An object couldn't be wronged. And these objects were moved through the empire's administrative networks, like inventory. That is the world Rome created. A well-oiled bureaucracy designed not just to conquer, but to convert people into assets. And the arena, Rome's crown jewel of entertainment, was one of the final stops on that chain. The gladiatorial games weren't just public entertainment. They were part of Rome's propaganda engine. When you sat in the stands and watched a chained enemy, someone from a recently defeated tribe, forced to fight a lion, you weren't just witnessing an execution, you were being given a message. This is what happens to anyone who opposes us. Violence wasn't a side effect, it was the point. And Rome weaponized this violence not only against foreigners, but against its own citizens. The elite understood that terror, spectacle, and dominance were powerful solvents. They dissolved the idea of resistance before it could even form. During the midday lull, when nobles left to eat and the most committed spectators stayed behind, the arena switched genres. It became a stage for public torture dressed up as mythology. Roman poets like Martial wrote about these performances with unsettling casualness. He describes a man forced to reenact the myth of Orpheus, the musician whose songs could tame wild beasts. Except in Rome's version, the prisoner was given a lyre shoved into the arena and mauled by a bear while the crowd snacked on olives and honey cakes. Martial also mentions, almost like he's reviewing an interesting play, a woman forced to act out the story of Pasiphae, who in myth had relations with a sacred bull. In the arena, this myth was performed literally. The woman died from her injuries. It was considered entertainment. This wasn't fringe. This wasn't an emperor having a bad day. This was decades of policy. Children attended. Vendors sold food. Writers rated the performances. To Roman society, these weren't atrocities, they were programming. They reinforced the message: Rome controls everyone beneath it, by law, by ritual, by spectacle. And in this climate, the system of rewarding gladiators with captivae wasn't a scandal, it was logistics. Gladiators. Heroes, slaves, and powder kegs. To understand the next part of this story, you need to know something strange about gladiators. They were the lowest of the low, slaves with fewer rights than stray dogs. And yet, they were celebrities. Their faces were painted on walls. Their names traveled across cities. Women from noble families snuck into gladiator schools for secret encounters. In Pompeii, graffiti calls one fighter the heart thief of the girls, and another the pride of the ladies. Their sweat, yes, their sweat, was scraped off their skin after fights, mixed with oil, and sold as a beauty product. Rome adored them. But Rome also feared them. The revolt led by Spartacus had scarred the Roman psyche permanently. Around 70 gladiators escaped, turned themselves into a real army, and defeated legion after legion. For 2 years, Rome watched in disbelief as arena slaves nearly destabilized the entire empire. When the revolt was finally crushed, the survivors were crucified along the Appian Way. 6,000 crosses stretching for miles. A warning carved into the landscape. After that, every Roman official, every trainer, every guard, every citizen in the stands, understood a terrifying truth. A gladiator wasn't just a performer. He was a weapon that could aim itself at Rome. So the state gave gladiators rewards, food, money, rare chances at freedom, and sometimes something even more primal: access to the captivae held beneath the arena. The sources don't describe this as a special privilege. They describe it like a system, routine, expected, embedded in the operations of the games, a reward not of honor, but of domination. A reminder that even a man forced to kill for entertainment still had power over someone else. That brings us back to the cells, to the woman waiting, to the footsteps outside the door. Let's go there. The tunnels below, beneath the Colosseum, the network the Romans called the hypogeum, were layers of corridors, animal cages, weapons rooms, elevators, staging platforms, pulleys, and tunnels for moving gladiators and condemned prisoners. But there was another section, a quieter one, a part that didn't serve the games directly. Rooms with stone benches built at a precise height. Iron rings embedded in walls, some low, some high, some at floor level. Doors with reinforced frames that locked only from the outside, and walls etched with scratches deep enough to be seen. Centuries later, these were the holding chambers for the captive. It wasn't rumor. It wasn't imagination. Archaeology still shows the scars. To understand what happened in those underground rooms, you have to look at Rome the way Rome looked at itself, not as a civilization, but as a machine fueled by bodies, discipline, and fear. Everything the empire touched was cataloged, measured, and assigned a purpose. And human being were no exception. When Roman legions crushed a rebellion, whether in Gaul, Germania, Britannia, Judea, or North Africa, the aftermath followed a script so predictable it might as well have been carved into stone. Officers oversaw the sorting process. Administrators recorded numbers. Slaves carried wax tablets full of names that were never meant to outlast the battles that destroyed them. This machine didn't operate on cruelty for cruelty's sake. It operated on utility. And in that machine, the captive, the conquered women, became a form of state property, tools for psychological warfare, economic profit, and morale management for the empire's most dangerous slaves, gladiators. But to grasp the scale of this system, we need to move step by step through its gears. A woman captured during a conquest began her descent long before she ever reached an amphitheater. First, she was marched with others, chained ankle to ankle, toward processing stations. These camps were temporary. The procedures were not. Roman officials called commentarienses recorded data into ledgers. A woman didn't receive a name. She received a category: Germanica, Britannica, Judaica, Sarmatica, Parthica. Your ethnicity became your label. Your label became your fate. From there, she was measured, examined, and scored like livestock. Age, reproductive health, physical condition, market value, intended destination. Some were marked for household slavery. Some were sent east to large markets. Some were reserved for military camps. And some, those considered young, strong, or simply chosen at random, were assigned to arena networks across the empire, not as performers, not as household slaves, but as inventory. The distance between this moment and the cell beneath the arena